So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, قال ذكرك أخاك بما يكره. Backbiting is to mention something about your brother or sister that they would not like to be mentioned. Remember the definition, I'm going to say it a few times so we all remember. Backbiting is to mention something about your brother or your sister that they would not like to be mentioned. I'll say it one more time. That backbiting is to mention something about your brother or your sister that they would not like to be mentioned. So before we go to say something about a brother, or before we go to say something about a sister, stop and pause. Would this person like that it be said? Stop and pause. Would they like that it be said or not? And if you don't know, then remain quiet. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, ذِكْرُكَ أَخَاكَ بِمَا يَكْرَهُ. قِيلَ, and we find from the etiquette of the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is that they sought understanding. So it was said, قِيلَ أَفَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ كَانَ مَا أَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ كَانَ فِي أَخِي مَا أَقُولُ. So the companions, they said, well, what if what I said is true? Because that's the response of some people sometimes. Well, it's true. That's the response of a lot of people. They say, hey, you shouldn't be saying that about your brother. You shouldn't be saying it's true. That's the response. So the companions, they said, well, what if it's true? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, إِنْ كَانَ فِيهِ مَا تَقُولُ فَقَدْ اكْتَبْتَهُ. And if what you said about him is true, if what you said is true, it's backbiting. If what you said about your brother or your sister is true, it's backbiting. And he continued that he mentioned, وَإِنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهِ فَقَدْ بَهَتَّهُ. And if it's not true, then it's slander. And if it's not true, then it's slander. Shaykh Abdullah Al-Bassam, rahimahullah ta'ala, he elaborates on this particular hadith, and we'll look at the benefits in this particular hadith. He mentions from the benefits of this hadith is the prophetic definition of backbiting. We don't need to make anything up. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam defined it. No need to make anything up. You say something about your brother that they don't like, that they wouldn't like to be mentioned, or your sister that wouldn't like to be mentioned, is backbiting. Don't say it's true. Don't say, well, I've seen it. None of that. If they don't like it, it's backbiting. It's a prophetic definition. It doesn't matter how you try to justify it. And there are some reasons where you have to mention things that a person wouldn't like to be mentioned. There are situations like that. Person wants to get married. They come to you and ask about the brother. The brother got a domestic violence history. Brother asking, should I marry this brother to my daughter? You got to say, no, he had a situation with his past folks. He don't want that be mentioned, but that's not called backbiting. It's called advice. But right now, this is not the time. We're not having this talk right now. It's not about exceptions to the rule. We're talking about the rule right now. We're not talking about the situations where it's okay because we don't have time to explain it right now. But the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Shaykh Abdullah Bassam, he said that this hadith teaches the prophetic definition of backbiting. To mention something about your brother or sister that they would not like to be mentioned. And imagine if you put it on social media. Imagine if you put it on social media. Backbiting. Let alone a step further, you put some slander on social media. It's not even true about the person. Shaykh Abdullah Bassam, he mentions to mention something about your brother or sister that he or she would dislike to be mentioned. It doesn't matter. Shaykh Abdullah Bassam, he said it doesn't matter what's about their stature, meaning their physical, how they're built, how tall they are, how short they are, how much they weigh. That doesn't matter. Or it's about their personality. It doesn't matter. And we're going to read some speech from Al-Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah. He's going to be very, very, very clear in the things that we need to stay away from. Just take Abdullah Bassam, he mentions it doesn't matter whether it has to do with their physical makeup. It doesn't matter whether it has to do with their personality. Any word that's stated about him or her that's disliked is backbiting. It's backbiting. However, he mentions, the sin will vary. The sin is going to vary. depending on how much is said about him or her. The sin is going to vary depending on how far the person is going to go. So imagine somebody sit there and have a whole conversation about a brother or sister. Whole conversation just backbiting the person. How do you think that's going to end up on the scale? Check up the law of Sam, he mentions, even if what is said is being true. Check up the law of Sam, he mentions some other benefits that he mentions. If whatever is said about him isn't true, then a person has combined between two things. We talked about the situation of slander. If a person slanders, now they fall into two travesties. They fall into two catastrophes. They've backbitten, they slandered the person, and they backbit them. Because of course if you slander them, they wouldn't like it to be said. So by default, it's going to fall into the definition of backbiting. But on top of that, it's slander. We got to be careful with our tongues, especially during the month of Ramadan and outside of the month of Ramadan. The tongue is an easy muscle to move.